1473. Workers dropped their tools and walked off the site. The crane they left behind sat frozen at the top of an unfinished tower for the next 400 years. Every generation born in Cologne grew up staring at it, a rusted monument to a project no one believed would ever be finished. Cologne Cathedral was designed in 1248 to be the largest Gothic structure ever built, twin spires reaching 5 and 15 feet into the sky. It would require engineering solutions that didn't yet exist. It would outlast every architect who designed it, every king who funded it, every generation that hauled its stone. Construction stopped in 1560. No one restarted it for 282 years. When workers finally returned to the site in 1842, they found something that changed everything. The original medieval plans buried in a library for centuries still intact. We are going to trace the 3 decisions that nearly ended 632 years of construction, and the one discovery that made completion possible after the world had stopped believing it would happen. The crane is still up there, for now. To understand why this building defied every law of medieval ambition, we have to look at Cologne in the year 1248, a city drowning in wealth and pilgrims. Cologne sat at the junction of 7 major trade routes and had been the most commercially important city north of the Alps for 3 centuries. Wealth moved through it like river current: wool, silk, silver, and pilgrims. Thousands of pilgrims. Because Cologne held something no other city in the Christian world could claim. 84 years before the first stone of the cathedral was laid, Archbishop Reinald von Dassel carried 3 wooden caskets into Cologne from Milan. Inside those caskets, bones. The supposed remains of the 3 Magi, the wise men of Bethlehem, the most venerated relics in all of Northern Europe. Cologne did not just receive them. Cologne became the destination. Within a generation, more pilgrims walked to Cologne to touch those relics than walked to Rome. The city needed a cathedral worthy of what it held. Archbishop Conrad von Hochstaden decided to build something the medieval world had never seen. He hired Master Gerhard, and Master Gerhard looked to France. The French Gothic cathedrals of the 13th century, Amiens, Chartres, Notre Dame, were already the most structurally complex buildings in human history. Cologne's new cathedral would model its proportions on Amiens, but exceed everything that had come before. The choir alone would rise to a height-to-width ratio that no medieval building had ever attempted. The physics required flying buttresses spanning distances that architects in France had never tried. The windows Gerhard planned would cover more surface area than any windows on Earth. On the Feast of the Assumption of Mary in 1248, Archbishop Conrad drove the first ceremonial stake into the ground. Workers poured the foundation. The construction of the choir began. Master Gerhard was dead by 1260. He never saw a single arch of his choir completed. The choir rose slowly, one course of stone at a time, through the reign of 3 archbishops, through shifting papal politics, through the constant financial pressure of a project that consumed the equivalent of the city's entire annual commerce every 5 years. By 1322, the choir approached its full height. On September 27th of that year, it was consecrated. 74 years of construction to complete the eastern arm alone. A generation of workers was born, apprenticed, trained, aged, and died before that single section of the cathedral was sealed. The project sealed the choir off with a temporary wall, so Mass could be celebrated while construction continued westward. The plan was straightforward: build the nave, raise the transept, begin the 2 towers. What no one in 1322 knew was that this was the last section of Cologne Cathedral that would be completed for more than 500 years. The problem was not stone. There was no shortage of Drachenfels trachyte from the quarries 40 kilometers up the Rhine, the same soft volcanic rock that built Roman Cologne 15 centuries earlier. Workers hauled it downriver by barge, cut it on site, and raised it in courses so precise that the joints between individual blocks measured less than a centimeter. The problem was money. Gothic cathedral construction at this scale required permanent fundraising infrastructure, papal indulgences, relic donations, pilgrim fees, noble patronage, merchant guild contributions, all simultaneously, all without interruption. In the century after the choir's completion, that infrastructure began to crack. The Black Death killed 1/3 of Cologne's population between 1349 and 1352. Trade routes shifted. The pilgrim traffic that once made Cologne wealthy began distributing itself across dozens of competing shrines. The South Tower rose slowly through the 14th and 15th centuries, driven by bursts of funding between long financial silences. By 1437, the great medieval bells, the Pretiosa and the Speciosa, the largest bells in the Western world at the time, were hung in the incomplete South Tower belfry. Their combined weight, over 16 tons. Their purpose, to call the city to worship in a cathedral that had no roof over its nave, no north tower, and no western facade. The ambition of the original plan was hanging in a half-finished tower. Ringing over a city that was starting to understand it might never see this finished. By 1530, the site was effectively silent. Workers had left the wooden construction crane they used to haul stone bolted to the top of the unfinished South Tower. They left it assuming construction would resume. It would not resume for 282 years. The crane stayed. The city grew around an unfinished cathedral in a rusting wooden crane frozen at the top of a stump. Every child born in Cologne in the 16th century, the 17th century, the 18th century grew up looking at that crane. That is not a metaphor. That is the actual skyline of the city. For 4 centuries. The Reformation arrived in Germany in 1517 and did not spare Cologne. Martin Luther's challenge to papal authority fractured the religious and financial networks that had sustained Gothic cathedral projects across Europe for 3 centuries. Indulgence sales, one of the primary mechanisms for cathedral funding, collapsed overnight. The 16th century ended. The 17th began. Cologne Cathedral stood at approximately 1/3 of its intended height. Its Gothic choir sealed behind a temporary wall, its nave a roofless shell open to rain and wind, its South Tower crowned with its wooden crane like a question mark frozen against the sky. In the construction office adjacent to the site, a small staff maintained the structure. They patched cracks. They cleared debris. But they did not add new stone. There was no money to add new stone, and there were no plans. Master Gerhard's original drawings for the western facade and towers had been separated from the project, moved, stored somewhere, lost. No one knew exactly where. Then Napoleon's army crossed the Rhine. In November 1794, French revolutionary forces occupied Cologne. Within 2 years, the occupying command ordered the cessation of all religious services in the cathedral. The construction workshop that had maintained the structure without interruption for 548 years was forced to close. Napoleon's troops moved into the cathedral itself. They used the Gothic choir, consecrated in 1322, as a stable. They stored artillery in the nave. They stripped lead from the roof and melted it for ammunition. The priceless shrine of the 3 kings, the reliquary that was the entire reason this cathedral was built, was smuggled out of Cologne by the cathedral chapter and hidden in the countryside before the French arrived. For the first time in its history, Cologne Cathedral was not just unfinished. It was occupied, stripped, and treated as a military warehouse. When French forces finally withdrew in 1814, the cathedral chapter returned and took inventory of the damage. Lead roofing stripped from 5 bays of the choir. Interior stonework defaced. The 14th century carved wooden stalls, 84 misericords, among the finest medieval woodwork surviving anywhere in Europe. Intact somehow, under decades of horse dung. The structure survived. Barely. In 1814, a Prussian official named Sulpice Boisseret began investigating the history of the cathedral's construction. Boisseret was part of the Romantic movement sweeping Germany. A cultural wave that saw Gothic cathedrals not as remnants of a superstitious age, but as expressions of a German national identity that transcended any single dynasty or church. He visited the cathedral archives. He searched libraries across the Rhine Valley. He wrote to cathedral chapters in neighboring cities, and in 1814 he found it. The original plan for the western facade, the elevation drawing that Master Gerhard's workshop had produced in the 13th century, was sitting in a drawer in the Darmstadt Library, 200 kilometers from Cologne. It had been there, separated from the project for at least 2 centuries. No one had catalogued it. No one had recognized it for what it was. WWII brought it to Cologne. For the first time in 282 years, the cathedral chapter could see, precisely in the original architect's own measurements, what Cologne Cathedral was supposed to look like when finished. This changed everything. Not immediately. WWII spent the next 28 years lobbying, publishing, writing to Prussian kings and Roman popes and German intellectuals, building the political case for completing what the Middle Ages had started. In 1842, it worked. On September 4, 1842, Prussian King Friedrich Wilhelm IV laid a new cornerstone at Cologne Cathedral in a ceremony attended by 60,000 people, the largest public gathering Germany had seen in a generation. He committed the Prussian state to funding 1/3 of the total construction cost. A new organization, the Central Dombauverein, was founded to raise the remaining 2/3 through public subscription. The citizens of Germany donated, not just Cologne citizens, not just Prussian subjects. Germans across the fragmented patchwork of 39 states that had not yet unified into a nation sent money to Cologne, because completing this cathedral had become a statement about what Germany was, what it had been, and what it intended to be. The crane on the South Tower, the one placed there in 1473, was still there, still standing. It would be used one final time before being dismantled. First, it needed to move stone again. Architect Ernst Friedrich Zwirner took charge of the project. His mandate was precise: complete the cathedral exactly as Master Gerhard had designed it in the 13th century, using the recovered plans as the authoritative guide for every dimension, every proportion, every profile. He had access to something Master Gerhard did not: industrial-age construction technology, steam-powered cranes, iron structural reinforcement, a railway line that delivered Drachenfels stone to the site in hours instead of days. What took the Middle Ages 270 years to half finish, Zwirner's team would complete in 38. The nave, that roofless shell that had sat open to the sky since 1560, got its vaulted ceiling. Workers raised the Gothic arches over the central aisle, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the interior of Cologne Cathedral was enclosed, dry, protected. The bishop consecrated the interior on August 15, 1848, the Feast of the Assumption, exactly 600 years to the day after the foundation stone was laid. But the twin spires were still missing. The completion ceremony of 1848 was, in architectural terms, premature. Half the structure that justified the celebration didn't exist yet. Zwirner pushed on. The North Tower began to rise in earnest through the 1850s. The South Tower followed, extending past the belfry level where it had been frozen for 375 years. The medieval crane, the one that had defined the Cologne skyline since before Columbus, was used one last time in 1868 to haul stone, and then carefully dismantled. Its wooden beams had survived 4 centuries of Rhineland weather. The Cologne skyline changed for the first time since 1473. The spires climbed through the 1870s. At 157 meters, they would be, when finished, the tallest twin-spired church in the world, and briefly the tallest structure of any kind on Earth. Workers hauled stone up scaffolding that now exceeded the height of every other building in Germany. The construction site at the top of the towers in 1878, 1879, 1880 was a workplace 500 feet above the Rhine plain, exposed to wind and weather with no engineering margin for error. The largest bell, the St. Peter's Glock, weighed over 27 tons. It was cast from 22 French bronze cannon captured during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. Kaiser Wilhelm provided the cannon himself. The largest bell in the Western world was made from the metal of an enemy army's artillery. It hung in the South Tower above the misericords that had survived Napoleon's horses. On August 14, 1880, the Feast of the Assumption, exactly 632 years after construction began, the last stone was placed at the tip of the south spire. Kaiser Wilhelm I attended the completion ceremony in person. An estimated 100,000 people filled the squares around the cathedral and the Rhine riverbank. The German Empire had just unified 39 fragmented states into a single nation and finished the most ambitious Gothic construction project in history. The crane was gone. The spires were complete. Both towers stood at 157 meters, separated from each other by only a few centimeters of height. A precision that spanned 632 years of construction and 3 entirely different centuries of workers. But the cathedral had not finished being tested. 64 years after completion, the Second World War arrived over Cologne. The RAF began bombing Cologne in May 1942. By the spring of 1945, Allied air forces had flown more than 260 individual bombing raids over the city. The medieval city center, the tangle of streets that had surrounded the cathedral since the Roman period, was systematically destroyed. By the end of the war, 90% of Cologne's buildings were rubble. The cathedral took 14 direct bomb hits. 14. Its roof was destroyed. Its stained glass windows were mostly blown out or severely damaged. But the iron roof trusses, installed during the 19th century construction, held the vaulted stone ceiling in place through bombardments that collapsed every concrete building within a kilometer. The iron roof saved the stone ceiling. The stone ceiling saved the interior. The interior saved the shrine of the Three Kings, still on its altar, still intact. On March 6, 1945, American tanks of the 3rd Armored Division crossed the Rhine and rolled into the ruins of Cologne. Soldiers photographed what they found: a city of rubble, utterly flat, and rising from the center of it, the 2 15-foot spires of Cologne Cathedral, blackened by bomb smoke, cracked, missing windows, but standing. Soldiers from both sides used the towers as navigation points. The spires were visible for 30 miles. The cathedral that Allied bombers used as a landmark to find the city was the same cathedral that their bombs repeatedly struck and could not collapse. 14 hits, 700 years of stone, still standing. The cost, counted now. Hundreds of workers died during the 19th century construction phase. Falls from the upper scaffolding alone account for dozens of documented deaths. Across all phases, across 632 years, the number of human lives consumed by this structure is not fully calculable. Only what those lives produced is countable. 157 meters, 632 years. The twin spires of Cologne still stand. Construction begins August 14, 1248. Construction ends August 14, 1880. Total elapsed time, 632 years to the day. More than 20 documented master builders led the project. More than 25 generations of workers hauled its stone. 14 direct bomb hits survived. Total stained glass area, more than 10,000 square meters, the largest in the world. And the original medieval plans, drawn in the 13th century, lost for 2 centuries, found in a library in 1814, used to finish the building in the 19th century, are preserved in the cathedral treasury today. The completed building matches those plans so precisely that structural engineers measuring it in the 20th century found deviations of less than 3 millimeters across sections built 600 years apart. Master Gerhard designed a building in 1248. It was finished exactly as he designed it, 632 years after he died. That fact, the 3 millimeter deviation, is the one that does not let go, because it means something specific about what happened over those 6 centuries. It is not an accident of craftsmanship. It is not luck. It is the result of a decision made in every generation that received this project, not to reinterpret it, not to modernize it, not to revise Master Gerhard's proportions to reflect the tastes of the 15th century, or the 17th, or the 19th, to build what he drew, exactly what he drew, even when his drawings were lost, even when the project had been abandoned for nearly 3 centuries. Even when 19th century industrial technology could have produced a faster, cheaper, structurally superior building. They built the 13th century cathedral in the 19th century, with steam cranes and iron roof trusses, to a 3 millimeter tolerance. There is an old saying in Cologne, No one knows exactly when it originated. When the cathedral is finished, the world will end. The people who said that were not being theological. They were being observational. They had been watching this construction for generations. They had watched it stop. They had watched it rot. They had watched a wooden crane rust on an unfinished tower for longer than any of them had been alive. They were telling themselves a practical truth. This will never be done. They were wrong. The crane that sat on the South Tower from 1473 to 1868 is gone now. But what those 400 years of a frozen crane represent is this. Every person who looked at it, every Cologne resident born between 1473 and 1842, across 369 years of human generations, looked at an unfinished project and made a choice. Some donated money, some ignored it. Some, in the 19th century, decided that what was frozen deserved to be finished. None of them started it. None of them finished it. But none of them tore it down. And that restraint, the collective multi-century decision not to dismantle the failed project and use the stone for something else, is as responsible for the completed cathedral as any master builder, any donation, any royal ceremony. This is what 632 years of construction actually looks like from the inside. It looks like 25 generations of architects who received a drawing they did not create and passed it on to someone they would never meet. It looks like a medieval crane preserved not by engineering but by the accumulated weight of a city that never quite gave up. It looks like French troops using a Gothic choir as a stable, and the same choir being used for Mass 14 years later, its stone unchanged. It looks like 14 bomb hits and 100,000 people at a completion ceremony and a 3mm tolerance across 6 centuries. It looks like a structure that had no rational reason to exist, and does. Every monument you've ever visited carries this behind it. Not beauty, not grandeur, not faith, but the specific and unreasonable human decision to keep adding one stone to the last stone, even when no one alive can say when it will end. At Monument Reborn, we peel back the postcard and find that decision in every structure that should have failed and didn't. What monument do you want us to excavate next? Have you ever stood beneath those twin spires and felt the weight of those 632 years? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to join us as we unearth the next secret of history. There are more towers to climb and more impossible buildings to reconstruct.